dónde?
Desde Alcácer.
Desde Alcácer, buena población, ¿no? Situada al norte del sur, del este, del oeste.
Sí.
Bueno, ¿y qué te cuentas? ¿Cómo llevas tú la tarde? Bien, ¿no? ¿Planeando ya el fin de semana? ¿Vas a salir?
No sé.
Desde luego que sí, a tope te lo vas a pasar. Bien, y este disco que tengo yo aquí preparado, ¿cómo se llama? Venga, dímelo tú.
Peter Sealing.
Efectivamente, Peter Sealing. ¿Y a quién se lo quieres dedicar?
A Isabel, a Miriam, a Desi,
Bueno.
a Maya, Marisa.
That call was made on November 12th, 1992. And on the very next day, something happened that no one foresaw. Something so terrifying that 75 days later, it would leave the entire country in a state of absolute shock. This is the horrific case of the Alcasser Girls. The girl on the radio was Antonia Gomez Rodriguez. Everyone called her Toñi. She was 15 years old, born in Valencia on May 25, 1977. The youngest of 4 children, named after her grandmother. People who knew her used the same word over and over: gentle. As her family put it, a strong gust of wind could scare her. She wasn't timid in a bad way. She was just soft, careful, kind. Her mother remembered the time Toñi came home one day cradling a kitten she'd found on the street, refusing to leave it behind. The cat ended up staying. Of course it did. She was also the kind of person who called home. On weekends, if she knew she'd be out late, she rang her parents to let them know. That detail matters. We'll come back to it. In that radio call, Toñi dedicated the song to Isabel, Miriam, Dessa, and Marisa, a group of friends. Miriam García Iborra was 14 years old, born on July 28, 1978. Unlike the other girls, she was the oldest child in her family. Her passion was ballet. She trained seriously. Her friends described a shyness that sat alongside a quiet warmth. She was the careful one in the group, the one who thought before she acted. Dessa, in Toñi's dedication, was María Deseada Hernández Folk, 14 years old. She had one sibling. If Miriam was the careful one, Dessa was the opposite. Sporty, competitive, always in the middle of something. It didn't matter the time of year. She was usually training for or competing in something, often coming first or second. In the early evening of Friday, November 13th, these 3 girls went to visit a friend. Her name was Esther. Esther was still ill. She couldn't go out. When they got there, they had a conversation that Esther would likely replay in her head for the rest of her life. They told her they were heading to a student party at a nightclub called Coulor in the nearby town of Picassent. "How are you getting there?" Esther asked. "Hitching or walking?" "Walking? No," the girls replied. "We'll hitch a lift." Hitchhiking from Alcasser to Picassent, a distance of 4 kilometers, was completely normal in 1992. These girls had done it before. Teenagers across the region did it regularly to get between towns after the last bus had gone. But Miriam, being the sensible one, tried to get a proper ride first. At 8 o'clock that evening, she called home from Esther's house and asked her mother to tell her father, Fernando, to come and drive them to Coulor. Her mother said it was a bit late. Her father was in bed with a cold. That was the last time anyone in the family spoke to her. What happened next has been pieced together from several witness accounts, some of which don't fully line up with each other. Earlier in the evening, before the visit to Esther's house, the girls had been spotted near the center of Alcácer by a teenage boy named Francisco Antonio Soria. He spoke to them briefly. When he asked if they were going to the party at Coulor, they said no. Why they said no, we don't know for sure. But after leaving Esther's at around 8:20, a neighbor named Francisco José Herbas was driving past with his girlfriend and spotted the girls. He offered them a lift. They told him they were heading to Coulor. His car had a leaking fuel tank, so he dropped them at a petrol station on the eastern edge of Picassent, just a few minutes' walk from the club. But that's where they were seen getting into a white two-door car. There were men already inside. That white car was the last confirmed sighting of Tonyi, Desiree, and Miriam. None of the three girls made it to Coulord. Friends who were at the party that night later confirmed to the families not one of the three girls had turned up. When the girls didn't come home that night, their families waited, and then worried. Tonyi always called when she was running late, remember? But this time, no call came. By the evening of November 14th, the three families went together to the local Guardia Civil post and reported them missing. The search began the same day. What followed was one of the largest missing person searches in Spanish history. The case went national almost immediately.
8 días y no aparecen. Son 3 niñas de 14 y 15 años y hace más de una semana que faltan de sus casas.
Miriam's father, Fernando García Mediano, quit his job to look for his daughter. He appeared on every program, every station, every outlet that would have him. Within days, he was a regular face on the nationally broadcast show, Quién Sabe Dónde. Alongside him was Esther, the last person to see the girls, now one of the most important witnesses in the entire case. A joint task force was set up between the Guardia Civil and the National Police, the UCO, based in Valencia and dedicated solely to finding the three girls. José Manuel Alcaina, the deputy mayor of Alcàsser, later described how the town organized search parties with 12 vehicles, spreading missing persons flyers across the entire region. Teenagers who had been hitchhiking to nightclubs, exactly as these girls had done, stopped doing so overnight. On Christmas Eve 1992, Fernando García appeared on a special edition of Quién Sabe Dónde, alongside Miriam's younger brother, Martín, 8 years old, who read out a handwritten note asking anyone with information to come forward. The days kept passing. No leads, no answers. The same exhausting uncertainty every morning, every night. By late January 1993, Fernando García had travelled to London, trying to get the case covered on British television. He wanted it to go international. He thought a bigger audience might create more pressure. He was in London on January 27, 1993. The exact day everything changed. Gabriel Aquino González, a retired farmer who kept beehives in a remote stretch of scrubland called La Romana, a rugged, uninhabited land roughly 35 kilometers southwest of Alcàsser, arrived at around 10 o'clock with his son-in-law, José Sala. It was cold, too cold for bees, which shelter inside the hives during low winter temperatures. So they waited. José sat on a stone. Gabriel went for a walk. 20 minutes later, Gabriel noticed something between the wild grass and scrub. Some soil and branches had been disturbed and pushed into a pile. He called José over. José had a tool with him, a spatula for the hives. He used it to pull back the branches. It was going to be the most horrible thing either of them had ever seen. A hand was sticking out of the ground. There was a watch on its wrist. The Guardia Civil and their Specialist Investigation Unit, UCO, were called. Under normal forensic procedure, you photograph everything before you touch anything. You document the scene exhaustively before a single item is moved. That did not happen. One photograph was taken of the bodies as found. Just one. And it shows little more than mud and dirt. After that, the bodies were removed. Items found at the scene were handled, moved, photographed out of context. Some were simply left at the scene. According to authorities, the three bodies were found stacked on top of each other in a shallow grave, roughly 1.5 meters long, 1 meter wide and 90 centimeters deep. They were wrapped in what appeared to be a large rug or carpet, green or brown depending on the light, heavily covered with dirt. 2 of the girls were found with their heads no longer attached to their bodies, and all 3 had their hands bound. Forensic examination addressed whether this was the result of deliberate decapitation or decomposition. That question was contested with autopsies. It was confirmed within hours. These were the 3 girls from Alcàsser. And there's one detail from the scene that stayed with investigators and has stayed with people who followed this case ever since. 2 of the girls were still wearing their watches when they were found. Both had stopped. Tonyi's watch had stopped at 11:20. Miriam's watch had stopped at 11:05. Whether those times reflect the moment of death, nobody could say for certain, because watches stop for many reasons. But those numbers would come back later. The bodies arrived at the Forensic Institute in Valencia on the evening of January 27th. The examination began the following morning. The 2 doctors assigned to the case were Dr. Francisco Ros Plaza and Dr. Manuel Fenalosa Gonzalez. Both had been hired through a temporary work pool rather than holding permanent positions. Not that would make any difference, but neither had conducted a court-ordered autopsy before. This would be the first for both of them. Faced with 3 murdered girls and the most significant forensic examination in recent Spanish history, the 2 doctors decided they needed help. That decision was reasonable. What happened next was not. The previous evening, Dr. Ros had received a phone call from Professor Luis Frontella Carreras, professor of forensic medicine at the University of Seville, one of the most respected forensic experts in his field in the country. Frontella offered to collaborate. Dr. Ros declined. Instead, 4 additional doctors were brought in, and a 6-person team was assembled. Leading them was Dr. Fernando Verdú Pascual, a professor of legal medicine, but currently on a leave of absence, meaning he hadn't conducted a court-ordered autopsy in years. What the autopsy established: all 3 girls had been subjected to sexual violence. All 3 were killed by gunshot wounds to the head. The forensic evidence also indicated sustained abuse prior to death. Injuries included fractures of ribs and vertebrae, broken teeth, and signs of having been beaten repeatedly. One of the girls was found with a nipple removed, apparently with pliers, while she was still alive. And that's when things start getting a bit messy. When the examination was done, one of the doctors stepped outside to where the press were waiting and said the autopsies had been, in his word, unimprovable. They were sufficient. But for some independent investigators, things were a bit off. 2 Guardia Civil officers had filmed the autopsies on video, not by court order. The footage was never entered into the case file. 4 people took photographs throughout the examination. The doctor's report concluded with a sentence: "A summary of the photographic record is attached." Think about what that means for a moment. In Spanish legal procedure, evidence only officially exists if it is formally entered into the case file. The photographs themselves were never incorporated into that file. A curated selection was. Someone decided which images made it into the official record and which did not. The families weren't satisfied. They requested an independent examination. Professor Luis Frontella Carreras, the same man whose phone call Dr. Ros had declined, was appointed to conduct it. When Frontella arrived, he found the bodies had already been washed. This destroyed an unknown but potentially significant amount of forensic trace evidence, DNA, fibers, biological material, before anyone could recover it. Also, multiple hairs found on and around the bodies had been collected together into a single container rather than separately, making DNA analysis far more complicated. Body parts had been removed unnecessarily. Biological material that could have helped establish time of death had been discarded. And on top of that, during the second autopsy, Frontella found something the first team had missed entirely: a cross and chain resting against the bones of the lower spine of one of the bodies. 6 doctors had examined that same corpse the day before. None of them had mentioned it. How 6 forensic doctors missed a cross inside a body, or whether someone put it there afterwards, remains unanswered to this day. So basically, Professor Frontella was being asked to produce an independent expert opinion on evidence that had already been compromised. His written report on the first autopsy was damning. In summary, he wrote that the errors made could lead to serious problems in checking the accused's account against the actual evidence, and would prevent the full truth of what happened from ever being properly established. Among the items found at or near the burial site was a piece of paper, a hospital outpatient document from the Hospital Universitario La Fe in Valencia. It had been issued to a man named Enrique Angles Martins for treatment of a venereal disease in 1992. The paper led police to a fourth-floor flat in a town called Catarroja. Guardia Civil officers arrived that evening with a search warrant, looking for the man named on the document. But they couldn't just walk in. The family blocked the entrance. Under Spanish law, police cannot force their way into a private home without either the family's consent or a court order. The family were not giving consent, so the officer in charge had to leave, find a duty judge, and obtain a formal authorization before they could legally enter. That took time. Exactly how much is not precisely documented, but it was enough. According to testimony given later by one of the sisters, one of the brothers had seen the police arrive and immediately barred the door with a stick, telling the family not to open it. That brother's name was Antonio Angles Martins. He was 26 years old. Antonio Angles was born in Brazil in 1966, but the family moved to Spain when he was around 2 years old, settling in Catarroja. His father was a severe alcoholic. His mother, Neusa, had at one point filed a restraining order against Antonio because of threats he had made toward her. He had been arrested 28 times. Between 1985 and 1991, he was imprisoned 5 separate times for receiving stolen goods, drug trafficking, robbery with violence. His final conviction was for kidnapping a woman named Nuria Pera, who had taken a bag of heroin from him, chaining her to a pillar in the family home and beating her continuously for approximately 25 hours. He was sentenced to more than 6 years, but he served less than 1 year. In March 1992, the prison granted him a 6-day home leave pass. He walked out and never went back. So Antonio knew exactly what the police coming to this door meant for him. In a matter of seconds, he was gone. By the time police returned with the court order, Antonio had already jumped from a window and disappeared into the night. But his brother Enrique didn't go anywhere. He stayed. And within a few minutes of speaking to him, it became clear Enrique wasn't going to be the answer to anything. Enrique Angles Martins had schizophrenia combined with a moderate intellectual disability. By all accounts, he was a gentle, entirely harmless man who struggled to function on his own and relied entirely on his family. When police questioned him about the girls, he told them he had killed them because they hadn't wanted to dance with him at the nightclub. Authorities soon realized his story didn't add up. The premeditation involved in what had happened to these 3 girls, the location, the pit, the method, was not something Enrique was capable of. Police began to focus their attention instead on the brother who had just run, Antonio. But what about the hospital document under the name of Enrique that was found with the bodies? You might be wondering. Well, according to investigators, Antonio routinely used his brother's identity and those of others around him because he was already on the run and couldn't put his own name to anything. The working theory was that Antonio had attended the hospital appointment using Enrique's name to obtain a prescription, standard practice for someone trying to stay off official records, and the document had been in his possession the night the girls were taken. When investigators showed the issuing doctor photographs of both brothers, he recognized Antonio as the man who had come to his appointment. Now, back at the flat, officers found other people besides Enrique, his mother, his sister and her boyfriend, and then, shortly afterwards, having arrived without knowing what was happening, 2 more of Antonio's brothers, Mauricio and Ricardo, accompanied by a friend. a friend one of the officers recognized from a previous arrest, Miguel Ricard Tamarit. He was born in Valencia in September 1969. His mother died when he was 3. His father was also an abusive alcoholic. He left school young, drifted through jobs, had a daughter, did a stint in the army. By late 1992, he was living with the Angles family in Catarroja. His criminal record before Alcàsser was not violent. 2 brief spells in prison in 1992, both vehicle-related, both under 3 weeks. He was a regular face at the Coulor nightclub. Miguel Ricard was formally charged in the early hours of January 28th. At that point, he refused to make a statement and declined a lawyer. Both positions changed within 24 hours. What came next was not one confession, but multiple, made between January and March 1993, but with no audio, no video, and no publicly available account of what was said in that room between each statement. His first official account, given roughly 24 hours after arrest, was relatively sparse. He initially claimed that he and Antonio had picked up the girls at the petrol station, and that the 3 girls had come along with them willingly on the drive out to La Romana. He stated that once they arrived at the destination, he had an intimate moment with Desiree, while Antonio went off with Tonyi and Miriam. He then said he had heard 3 gunshots from a distance, implying that Antonio had killed Tonyi and Miriam out of his sight. He simply said they dug a pit and put the bodies in it. It was vague. It didn't account for Desiree's death at all, and crucially, it was given before the autopsies had been completed, another detail that would later become one of the most scrutinized elements of the entire account. By March, the account had changed substantially. This final confession is the one the court treated as authoritative. It was also the most detailed, and the one that most closely tracked what had by then emerged from the forensic examination. Ricard said the pair had picked the 3 girls up as they were hitchhiking. When the girls realized that they were going past the nightclub and weren't stopping, they started to complain. Ricard told Antonio to turn around and leave them there. Antonio slapped him on the back of the neck twice and said that in the car, he was in charge. They headed to a crumbling abandoned house near a place known as La Romana, in a very isolated and mountainous area. This, according to Ricard, was a place Antonio Angles knew well. It was the area where Antonio Angles used to hide when the Guardia Civil were looking for him. He suggested that place as a great place to take the girls. At the abandoned house, the girls were tied up and sexually assaulted on a mattress left inside. According to Ricard, partway through the night, the 2 men drove 14 kilometers down a narrow, badly maintained mountain track to the village of Catadal. At a bar called El Parador, around midnight, they bought food, 3 or 4 sandwiches, a salad, and a bottle of water, and drove back up to the house. The torture extended over 2 days. Then the girls were made to enter a shallow grave that had already been dug. After killing them, Antonio placed a carpet at the bottom, threw the bodies in one by one, covered them, and piled dirt on top. Then they picked up the gun cartridges and cleaned the car. That is the official account of what happened between the petrol station and the pit. Now, there is one element of that story worth pausing on, because it sits uncomfortably even within the confession itself. The Guardia Civil's written record states the bar owners confirmed Ricard and Angles were at El Parador on the night November 13th. Both bar owners denied this under oath at trial, stating they never confirmed it was that specific date, and the wife said the man outside did not match Antonio Angles. He was too short. She said the person was more similar in build and appearance to Mauricio, Antonio's brother. Miguel Ricard went to trial in 1997. He took back all his confessions, telling the court he'd been tortured into making them. He said the only genuine contribution he made to any of those documents was his signature. He presented an alibi for the night of November 13th. The court rejected his retraction. The court rejected his alibi. He was convicted on all counts. Miguel Ricart was sentenced to 170 years in prison. That number was a moral statement, an expression of the weight of what the court found him responsible for. But under the Spanish law that had to be applied, the maximum anyone could actually serve was 30 years. With applicable reductions, Ricart served approximately 20. He was released in June 2013. The families were devastated. The debate about sentencing laws, about what justice actually means, it came flooding back. And with it, something else came back too. All the questions about this case that had never been answered. The case officially closed in 1997. Miguel Ricart was sentenced. Antonio Angles ended up being one of the most wanted fugitives in Spanish history. Spain was told it had the answer, but what it actually had was a verdict. Those are different things. What it never had was a satisfying explanation for some very specific, very documented things that didn't add up. 30 years later, online forums are still running on this case. Threads across Spanish platforms have run to thousands of pages. People who have visited the sites themselves cross-referenced the court documents, measured the distances, photographed the buildings. Some don't agree on who did it, but they largely agree on one thing. The official story, as told, does not hold together. I'll leave it here for today. If this video was worth your time, a like and a subscribe go a long way. Keep vigilant, and as always, thank you for watching.